To the right of the gate of the prison, there was a big bonfire set up with railroad ties as boundaries. It was about 15 foot square. And they had been burning bodies in an open pit there. The fire had gone out, but there were still every part of the human body you can imagine lying around in the fireplace. Then outside the gate, there was an open mass grave that they said held an estimated 3,000 bodies. Now, Ohrdruf was a work camp. It wasn't an extermination camp. But they did a pretty good job of exterminating people by working them to death and starving them to death. The prisoners in this camp were being used to dig tunnels in the mountains nearby. The Nazis planned to have underground factories, underground storage for aircraft and tanks, so that the Allied Air Force couldn't affect them. The next day after the liberation, the commanders went to the town of Ohrdruf and brought every civilian to walk through the camp and see what their soldiers had been doing. Most of them said, "We never knew anything about this." And the mayor of the town committed suicide the night after they had walked through the camp. A few days after the liberation, General Eisenhower and General Bradley and General Patton came and visited the camp. And General Eisenhower said, "I want detailed photographs of every detail of this grisly setting so that we can have the evidence in the future when somebody tries to say it never happened." General Patton was somewhat overcome, and he had to go vomit. This wasn't the only labor camp in Germany. All over Germany, they used slave labor in their factories, in their munitions plants, the chemical plants. They were using them to repair the railroads that the Allied bombers had destroyed. And after the war, there was a huge problem by the Allied forces handling all of these displaced persons who suddenly had no place to live and no source of food. So the Allies had a tremendous problem feeding and housing and repatriating these people. There were a large number of Russians and Polish among the labor force. And right after the war, the Allies sent a trainload of Russians back to Russia for repatriation. Stalin, when they arrived in Russia, said these people are probably contaminated by Western culture or Nazi culture, so he had every one of them executed. If there was a more vicious murderer in World War II than Hitler, it was Stalin. Over the years, the countless people had been, by the millions, had been executed in Russia. After the war, I was stationed in Linz, Austria, which is on the Danube River, and it was the boundary between the Russian and American zone. The bridges across the river were manned by guard stations of Russians and Americans. There was a lot of civilian traffic crossing the bridges, going back and forth. And our job was to check the papers of people as they came across, and also to keep the Russians from coming across. The Russian guards were the lowest peasants you can ever imagine. They were just absolutely reckless. If a bus came across the river and didn't stop exactly on the spot, they had machine guns that they'd fire in the air to get people's attention. One interesting thing that happened standing guard, after the war, there was a terrible, what's the word? Can't think of it, but everywhere in the world, everywhere in Europe, there was a terrible epidemic, that's what I was trying to say, of body lice. So the Americans set up checkpoints, and as people came through, they opened up the collars on their pants and blew great volumes of DDT dust in. And the women were not accepted. Sometimes when the people came across the bridge and saw an American guard post, they pulled out this little white card and said, DDT, DDT. They didn't want that again. I spent a year in Austria, then was redeployed back to the States and was discharged in San Antonio in June of 1946 after 2 years of service. I appreciate all of you coming to hear my story of the Holocaust. Those of us who were there will never forget it. And I hope that by hearing it from me, the memory will continue so that somebody, someplace can't say it never happened. It really did. Thank you.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time to stand and say, God bless